The morning was bright, and the airport was buzzing with the usual energy of travelers rushing to catch their flights. Among them was a man, neatly dressed in a dark suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked calmly, his steps measured, and his eyes scanning the departure screens to check his gate. He was a lawyer, a professional who spent his days navigating complex cases, negotiating settlements, and ensuring justice was served. Today, however, he was just another passenger waiting to board a flight that promised a simple, uneventful journey. He approached the gate and presented his ticket to the airline staff. Everything seemed normal at first. The staff smiled politely, asked a few standard questions, and directed him to board the plane. The man walked down the jetway, nodded at the flight attendants, and found his seat. He placed his briefcase in the overhead compartment, settled into his chair, and took a deep breath. Traveling had never been his favorite activity, but he was used to it. He opened a small notebook and began reviewing notes for an upcoming case, trying to focus on work while the hum of the plane's engines and the chatter of passengers filled the cabin. Moments later, the airline captain appeared at the front of the plane. Dressed in the crisp uniform that symbolized authority, he walked briskly down the aisle, his eyes scanning the passengers. The captain's expression was stern, his jaw tight. When he reached the lawyer, he paused, his gaze lingering a little too long. The man looked up from his notebook and offered a polite smile. He did not understand why the captain's eyes seemed to pierce through him, assessing him as if he had done something wrong. "Sir," the captain said, his voice sharp and commanding, "you need to step outside." The lawyer blinked, surprised. "Excuse me?" he asked, closing his notebook. "Is there a problem?" The captain did not answer immediately. He folded his arms and leaned slightly closer. "You're being asked to leave the plane." Now, confusion and a hint of panic rippled through the lawyer's mind. He had no idea why he was being singled out. He had followed every rule, had not spoken to anyone inappropriately, and certainly had not caused any disturbance. He looked around the cabin, noticing passengers turning to watch the interaction. Some raised eyebrows, others whispered. Quietly, their curiosity piqued by the unusual scene. "Sir, I really don't understand," the lawyer said calmly. "Could you tell me why I'm being asked to leave?" The captain's eyes narrowed. "You are causing a disturbance. You need to get off the plane." The lawyer shook his head, disbelief creeping into his voice. "I haven't spoken to anyone or caused any trouble. I've been sitting quietly, working. I'm not disturbing anyone." Passengers began to murmur among themselves, glancing at the captain and the lawyer. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Some passengers whispered to their neighbors, wondering if they had missed some behavior from the lawyer. Others looked uncomfortable, feeling the unfairness of the situation, even without knowing the details. The captain seemed impatient, tapping his foot slightly. "I said, get off the plane," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for discussion. Lawyer remained calm, his voice steady but firm. "I would like to understand what rule I've broken. I am a passenger like everyone else. I have followed all instructions. Please, explain to me why this is happening." The captain's face hardened. "It's not up for discussion. Get your things and leave." A flight attendant appeared, walking cautiously toward the lawyer. "Sir, please comply," she said softly, her eyes apologetic. "The captain has made his decision." The lawyer looked at her, nodding slightly, recognizing that she was just following orders. He gathered his briefcase and personal belongings, maintaining his composure despite the growing embarrassment and confusion. He stood slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on him. Some passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the injustice. Others pulled out their phones, curious and concerned about the situation unfolding in front of them. As he walked down the aisle toward the exit, he noticed a few passengers whispering among themselves. One woman, seated nearby, leaned over and said quietly, "I don't understand why this is happening." "You haven't done anything wrong." The lawyer nodded politely, offering a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you," he said quietly, though. His mind raced. He could not fathom why the captain had targeted him. There was something in the way the captain looked at him that felt more personal than professional, something that made him suspect this was not about rules or regulations. He reached the door and stepped onto the jetway, the cabin door closing. Behind him with a hiss that seemed to amplify the unfairness of the moment. Ground staff were waiting outside, looking a little confused. They had been instructed to remove the passenger, but they did not seem to fully understand the situation either. "Sir, please wait here while we sort things out," one of the staff members said, his voice cautious. "The captain wants you. Off the plane for now." The lawyer nodded, standing still, trying to remain calm. He looked around the terminal, noticing the stream of passengers walking past, some heading to their gates, others stopping briefly to check flight information. He felt isolated, singled out in a sea of travelers, and yet he remained composed. He knew that losing his temper would only make the situation worse. As he waited, he thought about the events that had led him here. He had spent the last several weeks working on a high-profile case, one that involved fighting for justice and exposing wrongdoing. He wondered if somehow the captain had recognized him, though he could not imagine why that would lead to such hostility. He shook the thought away, focusing instead on staying calm and professional. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like an eternity. Passengers on the plane continued to look out the windows, some glancing at the terminal, wondering what had become of the man who had been asked to leave. A few took out their phones and began recording, sensing that something was not right. The lawyer did not notice them yet, but the cameras were capturing every moment, documenting the unfairness. "Sir, the captain says you are not allowed to board this flight today. He will not provide a reason beyond what he has already said." The lawyer took a deep breath, his hands gripping his briefcase a little tighter. He nodded slowly, accepting that the situation would have to be addressed later, through the proper channels. "Very well," he said calmly. "I will wait here and follow. I expect a formal explanation in writing." The staff member nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "Of course, sir. You can speak with our customer service team about the next steps." As the lawyer sat down in the waiting area, he noticed the first ripple of reactions from the passengers. Some were whispering to each other. Others were shaking their heads in disbelief. The small group of people who had been watching closely, showing their concern by approaching the flight attendants and asking for more information. The mood on the plane had shifted. What had seemed like a routine flight had now become a story of potential injustice, and the passengers could feel it. The lawyer pulled out his phone and composed a quick note about the incident, documenting every detail while it was still fresh. He wanted to make sure that the truth was preserved, that there would be a record of his behavior and the captain's actions. He remained calm, his mind focused on gathering facts rather than succumbing to frustration or anger. Meanwhile, the captain returned to the cockpit, unaware that passengers had already begun recording and discussing the incident. He reviewed his decision with a sense of finality, believing he had acted correctly. However, he could not see the cameras capturing the entire event, nor could he hear the hushed conversations of passengers questioning his authority. The seeds of accountability were already being planted. As the minutes turned into an hour, the lawyer continued to wait patiently, occasionally speaking with airport staff to assure that a formal complaint would be filed. He maintained his calm, professional demeanor, refusing to let the humiliation of being unfairly removed from the flight break his composure. His focus remained on the facts, on documenting the truth, and on ensuring that the situation would be addressed properly. Passengers on the plane began sharing their observations with each other, some expressing disbelief that a man could be removed from a flight without explanation. Others speculated about the captain's motives, sensing that there was more to the story than met the eye. The atmosphere in the cabin had shifted from routine to tense, from ordinary to a moment that would not soon be forgotten. The lawyer, sitting quietly in the terminal, reflected on the strange and unsettling experience. He had flown hundreds of times before and had never encountered such treatment. He wondered what had triggered the captain's decision, but he knew that losing his temper or reacting impulsively would only make matters worse. Instead, he focused on maintaining his dignity, gathering evidence, and preparing to pursue the matter through the appropriate channels. As he waited, he noticed a few passengers approaching the terminal entrance, looking for him. Some had been sitting near him on the plane, and they wanted to make sure he was okay. They offered words of support, expressing their disbelief and admiration for the way he had handled the situation. The lawyer thanked them politely, appreciating. While the lawyer sat in the terminal, trying to calm his mind and focus on what to do next, the scene on the plane began to shift in ways the captain could not have anticipated. Passengers were still buzzing from what had just happened. Some were confused, some angry, and some simply shocked. It was not every day that someone was removed from a flight without any clear explanation, and the unusual nature of the incident had captured everyone's attention. A woman sitting several rows ahead, who had witnessed the removal, leaned toward her companion and whispered, "Did you see that? He didn't do anything. I don't understand why the captain made him leave." Her companion, a man with a notebook open on his lap, nodded silently. He had been watching carefully, and although he hadn't spoken to anyone during the incident, he could sense the injustice. He shook his head in disbelief, pulling out his phone and starting to record the empty aisle, where the lawyer had been sitting just moments ago. Not another passenger. An older man in the window seat muttered under his breath, "That wasn't right." He was quiet the whole time. Why would they do that? Soon, whispers turned into quiet conversations. People began discussing the event in low tones, trying to piece together what had happened. Some speculated that the lawyer might have said something offensive, while others were quick to defend him, pointing out that he had been calm and respectful. The atmosphere in the cabin became charged, a mix of curiosity, frustration, and the subtle tension of witnessing perceived injustice. The flight attendants moved down the aisle, checking on passengers and attempting to reassure them. "Everything is fine," one said, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. "The captain made a decision, and we are following protocol." Despite their reassurances, the mood remained uneasy. Passengers exchanged glances, some shaking their heads in disbelief, while others whispered quietly, clearly disturbed by what had occurred. A few passengers were discreetly showing their phones to one another, sharing the videos they had captured or discussing the odd behavior they had witnessed. It was becoming clear that the incident would not go unnoticed. Back in the terminal, the lawyer was unaware of the ripple effect his removal had caused. He sat quietly, watching people pass by, observing their movements and reactions. He felt a growing sense of unease, not just about what had happened to him, but about how arbitrary decisions could disrupt lives. He knew the truth would eventually come out, but in that moment, it was all he could do to remain calm and focused as the minutes ticked by. A few passengers decided to approach the gate staff, quietly asking about the lawyer. Why was he removed? One asked politely, "We didn't see him do anything wrong. We were on the plane and witnessed everything." The staff members, caught between following orders and acknowledging the curiosity and concern of passengers, could only offer vague responses. "The captain made a decision," one said, trying to sound neutral. That is all I can tell you at the moment. The passengers exchanged looks of frustration, sensing that something was deeply unfair. One of them, a young professional who had been seated near the lawyer, stepped aside and began reviewing the video he had captured, showing it to others. They nodded in agreement, seeing clearly that the lawyer had not caused any disturbance, had not spoken out of turn, and had been nothing but polite and composed throughout the incident. The conversation slowly drew a small group of concerned passengers together. They were not a large crowd, but the small circle of witnesses shared a growing sense that what had happened was unjust. They discussed the captain's behavior, noting the sharp tone, the abrupt commands, and the unmistakable air of hostility toward a passenger who had done nothing to provoke it. Meanwhile, the lawyer, still sitting calmly in the terminal, noticed someone approaching with a small notebook in hand. A passenger, hesitant but determined, said, "I was on your flight. I just want to say you did nothing wrong. We all saw that. It wasn't fair." The lawyer nodded, acknowledging the support with a gentle smile. "Thank you. That means a lot. It is important that truth is documented." Other passengers began trickling toward the terminal area, curiosity and concern overcoming hesitation. They had not wanted to get involved initially, unsure of the situation, but seeing the calm and professional demeanor of the lawyer inspired confidence. Quiet conversations began forming, passengers sharing observations and confirming what they had seen. It was clear that the incident was leaving a mark, not just on the lawyer, but on everyone who had witnessed it. Some passengers returned to their phones, posting short messages about the situation, careful to remain factual and respectful. They shared that a passenger had been removed from the flight without explanation, emphasizing that he had been quiet and respectful throughout. Within a short period, these posts began to attract attention, drawing comments and support from people outside the immediate scene. What had started as a private, confusing incident on a plane was slowly becoming public knowledge. Inside the cabin, the crew continued their duties, but the tension remained palpable. The seats where the lawyer had been sitting were now empty, a visible absence that passengers could not ignore. Some looked around at one another, whispering in low voices, silently questioning the captain's authority and judgment. Even those who were not directly involved could feel the weight of the moment, the sense that something had gone very wrong. Back in the terminal, the lawyer's calm presence continued to draw people toward him. Passengers who had witnessed the event felt compelled to offer support, to ensure that the truth would not be lost. Quiet conversations emerged, with one passenger explaining, "I think it's important that someone sees this. What happened wasn't right." The lawyer listened politely, nodding. He did not speak much, but his demeanor, composed and dignified, spoke volumes. People sensed his professionalism and integrity, and they were inspired by the way he handled an unfair situation with patience and grace. As the day progressed, the ripple effect grew. Passengers who had recorded or witnessed the incident began to share their perspectives online, documenting the story in real time. Social media posts began circulating, carefully describing the event without exaggeration. People were struck by the contrast, a calm, respectful lawyer removed from a flight by a captain whose behavior appeared biased and unprofessional. The story resonated because it highlighted fairness, integrity, and the courage to remain composed under pressure. The lawyer, meanwhile, remained focused on filing his complaint and ensuring the incident was recorded accurately. He interacted with airport staff politely, answering questions and providing necessary details. His attention to proper procedure reinforced his professionalism, demonstrating that he would not let the situation devolve into chaos or anger. While the terminal hummed with activity, the passengers from the plane continued to share their observations. Some who had been hesitant initially felt empowered to speak up, confident that the truth would eventually be recognized. Quiet conversations turned into small discussions, and discussions turned into a sense of collective awareness. People realized that their witness of the event could help ensure accountability. The airline staff, noticing the growing attention and discussions, became increasingly aware of the situation's gravity. The captain's decision, intended to assert authority, had instead sparked concern, curiosity, and scrutiny. Employees who had simply been following orders began to understand that their actions were now part of a larger story, one that passengers were determined to document accurately. By mid-afternoon, a small group of passengers had gathered near the terminal entrance, sharing notes and comparing observations. They discussed how the lawyer had remained calm, polite, and respectful, contrasting sharply with the captain's abrupt and hostile behavior. They recognized the importance of documenting the events carefully, understanding that their testimony could have a real impact on how the situation was addressed. In the terminal, the lawyer continued to wait, interacting with airport staff and preparing for the formal complaint process. He remained composed, thoughtful, and professional, never letting frustration or anger take control. Passengers who approached him noticed this demeanor and were further inspired by his integrity. They quietly admired his ability to navigate such a stressful and unfair situation with dignity. By the late afternoon, the story had begun to gain traction online. Social media posts and videos of the empty seat on the plane, along with the passengers' observations, started to circulate. The narrative was simple but compelling. A calm, respectful lawyer removed from a flight for no clear reason, highlighting a potential misuse of authority. People who saw the posts began commenting, sharing their support, and questioning the fairness of the incident. Passengers from the flight began contacting one another through social media, sharing information and corroborating the story. They felt a sense of responsibility to ensure that the truth was documented and recognized. The airline, meanwhile, became aware that the incident was attracting attention beyond the immediate scene. The ripple effect was growing larger, and the captain's decision was beginning to be questioned publicly. Through it all, the lawyer maintained his calm, patient demeanor. He continued documenting events, speaking with staff, and ensuring that the complaint process was moving forward. The lawyer waited in the terminal, quietly observing the flow of travelers and airport staff. He remained calm, though his mind was busy considering the next steps. He knew that if he wanted justice and clarity, he needed to handle the situation carefully. The airline staff had been polite but hesitant, clearly unsure how to respond to someone being removed without explanation. He approached one of the supervisors, politely introducing himself and explaining that he wanted to file a formal complaint. The supervisor, a middle-aged woman with a kind but cautious demeanor, nodded. "I understand, sir. Please have a seat, and we will begin the process." While the paperwork was being prepared, the lawyer reflected on the events. Being removed from a flight was unusual, but the way it had happened suggested more than just an ordinary misunderstanding. He had followed all rules, remained quiet, and had no interaction that could have justified the captain's harsh decision. His professional instincts told him there was something deeper at play, something unfair and perhaps biased. As he filled out forms and provided details to the staff, he remained composed. He knew that keeping his calm was essential. Any sign of frustration or anger could be used against him or misrepresented in reports. He described the incident factually, noting the captain's behavior, his own calm demeanor, and the reactions of nearby passengers. Every detail was documented carefully. Meanwhile, the story of his removal had begun to spread beyond the immediate area. Some passengers who had witnessed the event had shared short accounts with social media, and these posts were being passed around. Comments began to appear, many expressing disbelief and frustration at what had happened. People recognized the unfairness, even without knowing the full details. The lawyer remained unaware of this growing attention, focused entirely on the formal complaint process. Back on the plane, the captain returned to his seat in the cockpit. He adjusted the controls, ran through his standard procedures, and prepared for takeoff. He believed he had made the right decision. He did not consider that passengers had begun discussing the incident, sharing their observations discreetly, or capturing video evidence on their phones. The ripple of awareness was growing quietly but steadily. The passengers who had witnessed the lawyer's removal were talking among themselves, comparing what they saw and what they heard. One passenger said quietly, "He was so calm the whole time. I don't understand why the captain acted that way." Another added, "I know. It didn't make sense. He did nothing wrong." A young woman who had been seated nearby started sharing her video with other passengers. It showed the lawyer standing quietly, gathering his belongings, and walking down the aisle without argument. The group nodded, realizing that their collective observations could be important if the situation needed to be addressed formally. They saved the videos and notes on their phones, creating a record that could not easily be ignored. In the terminal, the lawyer finished providing his details to the airline staff. They were courteous, but their uncertainty was apparent. They clearly had not dealt with an incident like this before. One staff member said quietly, "We will review this, sir. I am sorry this happened." The lawyer acknowledged the apology with a nod, maintaining his calm. He understood that an apology alone would not resolve the matter. What mattered most was that the incident was documented accurately, that the evidence from passengers was preserved, and that the airline would follow its own procedures. He asked for confirmation that his complaint would be escalated to higher management, and the supervisor assured him it would be. While he waited for further instructions, the lawyer reflected on the subtle ways bias could appear in professional settings. This incident was a reminder that authority, when unchecked, could sometimes lead to unfair outcomes. He made a mental note to use this experience in discussions about accountability and fairness, perhaps even as an example in future work advocating for civil rights and proper conduct in public services. As the afternoon turned into early evening, the terminal became busier. Travelers hurried past, unaware of the events that had taken place on the flight. Some passengers who had witnessed the incident were still in the area, quietly discussing what had happened. One said, "We should make sure this gets to the right people. It isn't fair, and it shouldn't happen to anyone else." Another nodded, adding, "Agreed. The airline needs to know what really happened." The lawyer noticed the subtle energy in the terminal, the quiet sense of collective concern. Though people were not gathering in a formal protest or confrontation, their awareness and shared recognition of the unfairness gave him hope that the truth would not be ignored. He continued to document, speak politely with staff, and remain composed, knowing that his actions would help ensure that proper procedures were followed. On the plane, passengers began to discuss the incident more openly. Some were angry, some frustrated, and some simply curious. Their conversations were careful and polite, but there was a growing sense that the captain's decision was questionable. A few people mentioned that they had recorded video or taken notes. They exchanged contact information discreetly, intending to preserve the evidence for potential use if the situation required formal attention. The captain, still in the cockpit, remained unaware of the full scope of what was happening. He believed his authority was unchallenged, that he had acted decisively and correctly. He could not see the quiet documentation and sharing of evidence by passengers. He did not realize that his actions, though intended to assert control, were now being scrutinized and recorded by multiple witnesses. As the lawyer completed his complaint and prepared to leave, a few passengers approached the airline staff, offering to provide statements. They explained that they had witnessed the lawyer's calm behavior and the abrupt actions of the captain. The staff took their names and contact information, noting that their statements could be helpful in reviewing the incident. The lawyer, observing this, felt a quiet sense of validation. Though the experience had been frustrating and humiliating, it was encouraging to see that passengers were willing to support him by providing their perspectives. This collective attention to fairness gave him hope that the airline would recognize the mistake and take appropriate action. As evening approached, the terminal began to empty slightly. Travelers made their way to departure gates, pickup areas, or transportation. The lawyer remained calm, patiently waiting for final confirmation that his complaint had been formally logged. He continued to gather his thoughts, knowing that the situation would eventually require a response from the airline's higher management. Throughout this time, social media had begun to catch on. Posts about the incident circulated carefully, focusing on the facts and the calm demeanor of the lawyer. People outside the immediate scene began to comment, expressing surprise and support. The story, though still limited in reach, was beginning to attract attention from those concerned with fairness and accountability. Passengers who had been on the flight shared their experiences online, uploading small clips describing the events accurately and noting their observations about both the lawyer and the captain. The posts were respectful and factual, emphasizing the importance of fair treatment and proper procedures. This growing digital record added weight to the lawyer's complaint and increased the likelihood that the airline would respond appropriately. By late evening, the lawyer had completed all necessary steps with the airline. He had provided a clear, detailed account, ensured that supporting statements from passengers were collected, and maintained his composure throughout the process. Though he had been removed unfairly, he felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. He had handled the situation with dignity, ensuring that the truth was recorded and that the proper channels were being followed. Meanwhile, passengers on the flight had continued to discuss the incident among themselves, sharing observations, recording videos, and saving details for potential follow-up. Their collective awareness reinforced the sense that the removal had been unjust, and that accountability would be necessary. The story, once confined to a single plane, had now spread to a wider circle of witnesses, all of whom were committed to documenting the event accurately. The captain, still unaware of the growing attention, believed that his authority was secure and his decision correct. He could not see the quiet, determined efforts of passengers to preserve evidence, share observations, and ensure accountability. He did not realize that the actions intended to assert control would eventually lead to scrutiny, review, and potential consequences. As the terminal emptied and the day came to a close, the lawyer reflected on the events and the lessons learned. Authority, when unchecked, could sometimes lead to unfair decisions. Calm, composed, and principled behavior could not only protect one's dignity, but also help ensure that justice was recognized. He had documented everything carefully, collected supporting statements, and prepared for the next steps. Though the incident had been unpleasant, it had also reinforced the importance of patience, professionalism, and integrity in the face of unfair treatment. By the end of the day, the lawyer left the terminal with his belongings, maintaining his composure and dignity. The story of his removal was quietly growing, documented by multiple witnesses and beginning to spread. The story of the lawyer being removed from the flight began to gain momentum as social media posts and videos were shared widely. The videos were clear, showing him behaving calmly, gathering his belongings, and walking down the aisle without any argument or confrontation. The passengers who had witnessed the incident had saved their recordings, some sharing them with friends, family, and a few online platforms. Within a few hours, the story started to attract attention beyond the immediate circle of travelers. At first, the airline's customer service department was slow to respond. They had received a few inquiries about the incident, but the volume grew quickly as videos circulated online. Staff members were unprepared for the sudden public scrutiny. Some employees discussed quietly among themselves, wondering how something that seemed like a minor internal issue could escalate so quickly. They could sense the growing weight of the situation, but were unsure how to respond without guidance from higher management. Meanwhile, the lawyer had returned home after spending hours in the terminal. He remained calm but thoughtful. He knew that the documentation he had collected and the witnesses who had come forward were his strongest tools. He reviewed the messages and videos people had shared online, seeing that the story was resonating with many. People were outraged that a calm, polite passenger could be removed from a flight without explanation. The narrative was simple yet compelling. Fairness had been violated, and the truth was being recognized by those who witnessed it. The lawyer began receiving messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers expressing support. Many noted that the situation highlighted a larger issue: the unchecked authority of individuals in positions of power and the importance of accountability. Some shared suggestions for next steps, encouraging him to remain focused on formal complaints and legal avenues, while others offered moral support, praising his composure and integrity. At the airline's headquarters, management had finally been made aware of the situation. The videos were brought to the attention of supervisors and legal teams. As they watched, it became clear that the lawyer had acted with professionalism and that the captain's behavior appeared abrupt and unjustified. The evidence contradicted any claims of disturbance, showing that the passenger had done nothing to merit removal from the flight. Executives began discussing the implications. They realized that if the public perception was negative, the airline's reputation could be damaged. The story was gaining traction online, and the more people saw the videos, the more questions arose about the captain's judgment. The legal department noted that there could be serious consequences if the situation was not addressed promptly and fairly. The captain, unaware of the viral nature of the situation, continued to prepare for future flights, believing he had acted correctly. He did not yet see the videos, did not know that passengers were sharing their experiences, and did not realize that his decision would soon be questioned at the highest levels. His confidence in his authority was based on routine procedures, but it was about to be challenged in ways he could not anticipate. Meanwhile, the lawyer stayed in touch with a few of the passengers who had been on the flight. They shared details, coordinated statements, and ensured that the recordings and accounts would be available for formal investigation. The lawyer remained composed, reviewing every piece of evidence carefully. He understood that presenting facts clearly and professionally would be far more effective than emotional reactions. As the day progressed, media outlets began picking up on the story. Small reports appeared online, describing the incident without exaggeration, but highlighting the unusual nature of a calm, professional passenger being removed without explanation. The narrative resonated because it involved fairness, authority, and integrity. Readers could immediately relate to the situation, imagining themselves in similar circumstances and questioning how they might respond. The airline, sensing the potential public relations issue, convened an emergency meeting. Senior executives, customer service leaders, and legal advisors reviewed the evidence, including videos and passenger statements. They realized that the captain's behavior could not be easily justified and that a response would need to be measured, factual, and transparent. They began drafting an internal review process to assess the incident and determine the appropriate course of action. During the review, it became evident that the captain had a history of previous complaints related to similar behavior. While these complaints had been minor and individually overlooked, the pattern suggested that the captain occasionally allowed personal biases to influence professional decisions. The evidence in this case made it impossible to ignore. Management realized that they were facing more than just a single incident. They were dealing with a larger issue that required corrective action. The lawyer continued his work carefully, documenting all communications and interactions with the airline. He remained focused on facts, maintaining his professional demeanor. He understood that patience and clarity were critical. Any overreaction or hasty judgment could distract from the truth and weaken the impact of his complaint. Meanwhile, passengers who had witnessed the event continued sharing their accounts. They posted videos, sent messages to friends, and uploaded statements to social media, carefully describing what they had seen. Many emphasized the lawyer's calm demeanor, the abrupt behavior of the captain, and the overall unfairness of the removal. Their collective voices added credibility and weight to the incident, creating a strong foundation for accountability. As more people became aware, the story began to attract attention from journalists and bloggers. They sought to verify details, contact witnesses, and understand the broader implications. The narrative was compelling. A professional individual removed without reason, a captain whose authority was called into question, and passengers who documented the events to ensure fairness. The story highlighted not only the specific incident, but also the importance of accountability, transparency, and integrity in public services. The airline's public relations team worked quickly to prepare statements. They wanted to acknowledge the incident without admitting fault prematurely, emphasizing that a thorough review was underway. They were cautious, aware that any misstep could further damage the airline's reputation. The legal department coordinated closely with PR to ensure that statements were accurate, professional, and aligned with the ongoing investigation. The lawyer, still calm and composed, continued to observe the situation. He saw that the passengers' efforts, the video evidence, and the growing public interest were creating momentum. The truth, documented clearly and consistently, was beginning to assert itself. He knew that integrity and patience would be the key to achieving a fair resolution. As evening approached, the airline began contacting the passengers who had witnessed the incident, requesting statements and additional information. They wanted to ensure that the internal review was thorough and accurate. The passengers responded promptly, providing detailed accounts, uploading videos, and describing their observations. Their collective input added depth and credibility to the investigation. The lawyer received a message from one of the passengers, expressing gratitude for his calmness and professionalism during the incident. The message noted that his behavior had inspired others and helped ensure that the event was documented carefully. He replied with a simple acknowledgement, appreciating the support but remaining focused on the process. Back at the airline headquarters, executives reviewed all available evidence. They saw that the videos, passenger statements, and social media posts consistently supported the lawyer's account. The pattern was clear. He had acted respectfully and professionally, and the captain's actions were abrupt and unwarranted. Management realized that disciplinary action and review of procedures were necessary to prevent similar incidents in the future. The story continued to spread online, gaining further traction as more people viewed the videos and read accounts from passengers. Comments highlighted fairness, respect, and accountability, praising the lawyer for his composure and criticizing the captain's behavior. The narrative was simple, relatable, and compelling, capturing attention because it involved ordinary people witnessing extraordinary injustice. The lawyer continued to document the unfolding events, ensuring that his records were accurate and complete. He remained composed, speaking with airline representatives professionally and coordinating with witnesses as needed. He knew that the strength of the case rested on facts, evidence, and the integrity with which he approached the situation. By the end of the evening, the lawyer had completed all necessary documentation, communicated with witnesses, and observed the growing public attention. He remained calm and patient, confident that the truth supported by clear evidence and the accounts of multiple passengers, would eventually be recognized. The airline, aware of the increasing scrutiny, began preparing for the formal review process, knowing that the situation required careful handling and a commitment to fairness. As night fell, the lawyer reflected on the events of the day. The experience had been frustrating and unnecessary, yet it had also highlighted the importance of patience, composure, and integrity. By staying calm, documenting the facts, and relying. The following morning, the airline management held an emergency meeting. Videos, passenger statements, and online posts had all been compiled for review. Executives, customer service directors, and legal advisors gathered around a long conference table, watching the footage carefully. Each frame told the same story. A calm professional lawyer had been removed from a flight without any legitimate reason. The captain's abrupt behavior and harsh tone were clearly evident, leaving little room for justification. The room was quiet, except for the sound of shuffling papers and the clicking of keyboards. Some of the executives exchanged glances, recognizing the gravity of the situation. One legal advisor spoke first, breaking the silence. The evidence shows that the passenger did not violate any rules. The captain's actions were abrupt, unjustified, and may have been influenced by personal bias. We need to address this immediately. A senior executive leaned forward, his expression serious. We cannot ignore this. Our reputation is at stake. The passenger statements, social media posts, and videos all point to a misuse of authority. We need to take action against the captain, while also ensuring the passenger is acknowledged and compensated appropriately. The airline's PR team had already drafted an initial statement acknowledging the situation and promising a thorough review. They discussed how to communicate the findings once the investigation was complete. Transparency was essential. They needed to show the public that the airline valued fairness, accountability, and professionalism. Any hint of cover-up or avoidance could worsen the situation. Meanwhile, the lawyer had spent the night reviewing the evidence that passengers had shared. He had carefully saved all videos, screenshots, and notes, ensuring nothing could be lost or overlooked. He also kept records of his interactions with the airline staff, including times, names, and conversations. His calm and methodical approach ensured that he had a solid foundation for any formal proceedings that might follow. As the airline reviewed the materials, it became clear that the captain had a history of complaints, some minor and previously dismissed. The new evidence made it impossible to ignore a pattern of behavior. Management realized that the captain's judgment could not be trusted in situations that required neutrality and fairness. The decision to remove the lawyer without cause was not just a single error. It reflected an ongoing problem that needed to be corrected. The captain was called in for an emergency review. He entered the meeting room confidently, unaware of the depth of the concern about his behavior. Executives presented the videos and statements, showing the precise actions that led to the lawyer's removal. The captain watched silently at first, then began to speak, attempting to justify his actions. He claimed he had followed procedures and acted based on perceived safety concerns, but the videos clearly contradicted his statements. The legal advisor spoke firmly. Captain, the evidence shows that the passenger behaved appropriately. He followed all instructions, remained calm, and did not cause any disturbance. Your actions appear to have been personal rather than procedural. We have multiple witness accounts and recordings to support this. The captain's face tightened. He paused, realizing that his reasoning was not holding up. The room was quiet, except for the sound of the legal advisor presenting the evidence in a clear, factual manner. Every statement, every video frame, and every witness account worked together to illustrate the truth. A senior executive spoke next. We have no choice but to suspend you from active duty while we conduct a full investigation. Your actions violated airline policy and could have legal consequences. We will also provide compensation and a formal apology to the passenger." The captain swallowed hard, his confidence faltering. He had believed he was in control, that his authority was unquestionable. Now, facing the overwhelming evidence and formal scrutiny, he realized the severity of the mistake he had made. The consequences were immediate and unavoidable. Meanwhile, the lawyer continued his daily routine, maintaining a calm and professional demeanor. He received confirmation from the airline that his complaint had been formally logged and that an investigation was underway. Passengers who had witnessed the incident were contacted for statements, and all collected evidence was submitted to ensure a thorough review. Social media continued to play a role in shaping public awareness. Videos, posts, and messages documenting the incident circulated widely. The story resonated because it was simple and relatable. A professional individual treated unfairly, a misuse of authority, and the calm response of the person who had been wronged. People praised the lawyer's composure and called for accountability for the captain. In the airline headquarters, the investigation team reviewed additional materials. They noted the importance of documenting every interaction, ensuring transparency, and communicating findings clearly. The goal was not only to resolve this single incident, but also to reinforce policies that prevent similar situations in the future. Training programs and procedural reviews were discussed to strengthen accountability across the company. The passengers who had witnessed the removal were kept informed. They shared additional details, confirming that the lawyer had acted professionally and that the captain's behavior had been abrupt and unwarranted. Their statements added depth to the investigation, providing context and corroborating evidence that reinforced the lawyer's account. As the review continued, the airline drafted a formal apology to the lawyer. The statement acknowledged the mistake, affirmed that the passenger had acted appropriately, and offered compensation for the inconvenience and distress caused. The lawyer received the apology with his usual calm and polite demeanor, appreciating the recognition, but remaining focused on ensuring accountability and proper procedures. Meanwhile, the captain faced the growing realization of the consequences of his actions. His career, previously unchallenged in authority, was now under review. He recognized that his bias and lack of professional judgment had caused unnecessary distress and had been documented for all to see. The gravity of the situation became increasingly clear with each passing hour. Passengers and observers continued to discuss the incident online, sharing lessons learned and emphasizing the importance of fairness, accountability, and calm response. Under pressure, the narrative was simple and powerful, highlighting the contrast between the lawyer's composed behavior and the captain's misuse of authority. Public support for the lawyer grew, reinforcing the message that integrity and professionalism should always be recognized and respected. The airline continued to finalize its internal review, ensuring that all evidence was examined and that procedures were followed accurately. Legal advisors provided guidance on next steps, and the PR team prepared statements to communicate the findings to the public. The goal was to resolve the situation with transparency, integrity, and accountability, sending a clear message about the importance of fair treatment and proper conduct. By the end of the day, the lawyer's patience, composure, and careful documentation had paid off. The airline acknowledged the mistake, took action against the captain, and provided a formal apology and compensation. Passengers who had witnessed the incident expressed relief and satisfaction, knowing that their observations had contributed to a fair outcome. The lawyer reflected on the experience, recognizing that even in situations of unfair treatment, maintaining composure and documenting facts carefully could lead to accountability and justice. The incident had highlighted the importance of integrity, professionalism, and patience, and the ripple effect of public awareness had ensured that fairness was recognized. The captain, now facing suspension and review, understood too late the consequences of his actions. The truth had prevailed, and the lawyer had maintained his dignity throughout the entire process. In the days following the incident, the airline moved quickly to implement changes and ensure accountability. Management released a formal statement recognizing the mistake, offering a sincere apology to the lawyer, and announcing disciplinary action against the captain. The statement emphasized that the company valued fairness, integrity, and professionalism, and that steps were being taken to prevent similar incidents in the future. It was clear that public pressure, combined with careful documentation and witness accounts, had led to a positive outcome. The lawyer received the statement calmly. He acknowledged the apology and appreciated that the airline had taken responsibility. His focus remained on the principles at stake: fairness, accountability, and ensuring that such incidents did not happen to others. While the situation had been stressful and unfair, he recognized the value of addressing the problem through calm and professional actions rather than anger or confrontation. Passengers who had witnessed the removal were also reassured. They felt validated knowing that their accounts had been instrumental in uncovering the truth. Some shared messages online, expressing relief and highlighting the importance of documenting events accurately. They emphasized how collective awareness, patience, and careful observation could contribute to accountability and change. The airline also implemented additional training for its staff and crew, focusing on conflict resolution, professionalism, and recognizing unconscious bias. The review of procedures ensured that passengers would not be removed without proper justification or investigation. These changes, while prompted by a single incident, would have a lasting impact, improving the experience and safety of all future travelers. The captain faced a formal review process. He was suspended from active duty while the airline examined his actions and history. The investigation concluded that his behavior had violated company policies, showing a lack of professional judgment and impartiality. He was required to undergo training and evaluations before being considered for future assignments. The process made it clear that misuse of authority, bias, and unfair treatment would not be tolerated. For the lawyer, the experience became a powerful reminder of the importance of maintaining composure in the face of injustice. He had remained calm, documented everything carefully, and relied on the support of witnesses and formal procedures. These actions had ensured that accountability was achieved and that fairness was recognized. The incident also reinforced his belief in the power of truth and integrity, showing that even in difficult situations, ethical behavior could prevail. In the days after the incident, the story continued to circulate online. Social media posts and news articles praised the lawyer for his professionalism and composure, highlighting how passengers had come together to document the event. The narrative was simple but compelling, showing the contrast between fair and unfair treatment and emphasizing the importance of accountability in all areas of life. The lawyer received messages of support from colleagues, friends, and even strangers. Many expressed admiration for how he handled the situation, noting that remaining calm and documenting facts carefully had been the best response. Some shared personal stories of facing unfair treatment in their own lives, connecting with the lawyer's experience and finding inspiration in the way he responded. The airline used the incident as a learning opportunity, revising internal policies and emphasizing the importance of impartiality in all situations. Staff members were reminded to follow protocols carefully, to treat all passengers with respect, and to avoid allowing personal bias to influence professional decisions. These changes reflected a broader commitment to fairness and transparency, demonstrating the airline's willingness to learn and improve. Passengers who had been on the flight continued to share their experiences, highlighting the importance of being observant and willing to support fairness when witnessing unjust situations. Their collective efforts had contributed significantly to holding the airline accountable and ensuring that the truth was recognized. The story became a reference point for discussions about professionalism, integrity, and the responsibility of individuals to document and speak out against unfair treatment. For the lawyer, the experience left a lasting impression. He understood more deeply the importance of patience, composure, and careful action. He had turned an uncomfortable and unfair situation into an opportunity for positive change, demonstrating that calm, factual responses could influence outcomes and inspire others. The lessons learned would guide him in future challenges, reinforcing the value of ethics, integrity, and perseverance. The public reaction continued to be positive. People appreciated the airline's acknowledgement of the mistake and the steps taken to prevent similar incidents. The story resonated because it was relatable and human. It showed how ordinary people, through calm, ethical behavior, could ensure that fairness prevailed even in situations where authority was misused. In time, the lawyer returned to his regular routines. While the incident had been stressful, he felt a sense of accomplishment in knowing that the outcome had been fair and just. He continued his work, carrying with him the lessons learned about patience, documentation, and integrity. The experience became part of his personal story, a reminder of how calm, ethical action can lead to meaningful results. The captain, having undergone review and training, faced the consequences of his actions. The process emphasized accountability, demonstrating that authority comes with responsibility and that misuse of power has repercussions. The disciplinary measures and required training reinforced the importance of fairness and impartiality in professional settings, creating a precedent for future conduct. The passengers who had witnessed the event felt proud of their role in documenting and supporting fairness. Their actions had contributed to a just resolution and had helped ensure that the airline recognized the importance of proper procedures. The collective effort of witnesses, combined with the lawyer's calm professionalism, had created a powerful example of how truth and integrity can prevail. Over time, the story became a lesson for others. It highlighted the importance of staying composed under pressure, documenting events carefully, and supporting fairness when witnessing unjust situations. It demonstrated that even when authority is misused, careful, principled action can lead to accountability and change. The lawyer reflected on the journey from the initial removal to the final acknowledgement and resolution. He had faced an unfair and humiliating situation, but had turned it into an opportunity to reinforce principles of integrity and fairness. By remaining calm, documenting facts, and relying on proper channels, he had ensured that the outcome was just and that the experience had a lasting impact on the airline, the passengers, and the broader community. In the end, the incident served as a reminder that fairness, integrity, and professionalism matter. It showed that even in the face of unjust treatment, calm, ethical behavior can lead to meaningful results. The lawyer's response, the support of passengers, and the airline's acknowledgement together created a story of accountability and positive change, leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved.